Good evening, everybody. Welcome along this evening. We'll just let everyone join us before we get going. Good evening, welcome. We're just waiting for everyone to join the webinar. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Colette. Hello, everyone, and using the chat. Okay, looks like we're about there, so let's get cracking. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our latest Naturetrek Roadshow evening, this week covering birding and botany in Europe. This evening, we are going to be going to some wonderful parts of our lovely continent here, and I'm delighted to be joined by three of our fantastic tour leaders. We have got Jessica Turner, Andrew Cleave, and Mike Crewe. So hello to all three of them. And my name is Kerrie Porteous. I'm one of the operations managers in the Naturetrek office, occasional tour leader, not so much these days. I've got two young children. I'm hoping I won't hear from them this evening. My first webinar back last week, we had a screaming baby for this moment. So all is quiet here this evening in Surrey. So fingers crossed it stays that way. I look after a whole selection of our tours across the world really, but quite a lot of them around mountainous Europe in particular. And I'm going to be talking to you about one of my absolute favourite places, Switzerland. But we're also going to be covering Majorca with Mike to begin with. We're going to be going to Puglia in Italy with Jessica. Then we're going to finish the evening in the Isles of Scilly with Andrew. We're all feeling pretty positive at the moment in the Naturetrek office. It's been a really, really busy couple of weeks since we came back after Christmas. It's been pretty manic really, which is fantastic because it's not been manic in a good way for 2 years now. So we are delighted to be organising trips, sending people abroad, organising holidays all over the world all of a sudden again. So that's fantastic. It looks like testing is getting easier, not harder, which is also great. And we're always there to support with any problems, queries, worries that you have on that front. So you know where we are. But otherwise, we are going to crack on. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to hand over to, who's starting? Mike, you're starting to take us to Majorca. So over to you, Mike. Oh no, before that, Mike, please do use the chat function. Please do use the Q&A. If you've got any questions, do ask us and we will answer them either as we go along this evening or we'll come to them at the end. We've got Q&A section at 9:05. Now I really will stop talking and hand over to Mike to take us to Majorca. Over to you, Mike.
Okay, hello everybody. So we're going over to sunny Majorca. Can everybody see that okay? Does that look all right to you, Kerrie?
Yes, that looks good to me.
Excellent. Okay, so spring and autumn birding in Majorca is the title of what I'm talking about. Really, I'll touch on some other bits and pieces as well, because Majorca is one of those islands that's a lovely little Mediterranean island that is nice for birds, but also has many other things. So we'll touch on at least some of the endemic plants that occur in the island. I'll start off with a map here. I'm just going to make sure that I've got a clock nearby so I don't overrun. I'll just start with a map as if anyone doesn't know where Majorca is. It's such a famous destination. It's been a major tourist destination for such a long, long time. And in fact, that's kind of interesting because despite that, it's still pretty amazing for wildlife. So it's managing to pull off a kind of a double whammy of being somewhere for people to go and lie on the beach as well as somewhere for the rest of us to go and look at wildlife. So here's a photograph of the Western Mediterranean region, which I'm sure you'll all recognize, Southwest Europe. And I've put Majorca slap bang in the middle here so you can see where it is. It's the largest of the 5 major islands of the Balearic Islands, which are in the middle of this western part of the Mediterranean here and are administratively part of Spain, one of their autonomous regions. And for those who like such things, I've popped the flag down in the bottom right-hand corner there so that you know exactly where we are. Going a little bit closer, here is an overview of the island itself. It essentially is relatively low-lying, relatively flat through the center of the island here. little bit of higher ground running up through here and here, but then particularly this ridge of limestone mountains that run along this northern and western side of the island. And this produces some great wildlife watching for us. It culminates in the highest point around about here, Puy Major, which is the highest point on the island. It's somewhere around about 4,000 feet above sea level. This area up here is where we stay. Our hotel is about here. And to give you an idea, the airport is here. So on arrival, it takes about 40 to 45 minutes to drive from here, just across along this one main road and into the outskirts of Alcudia, which is where we're based. So I'll zoom in onto this little part of the island here, which is this map here. And on here, I can kind of show you the majority of the places that we tend to go during our week stay on the island. Most of our trips to Majorca tend to come under our go slow trips. So they're pretty easy going. There's plenty of opportunity if people want to opt out for half a day or a day here and there and go and look at other things. That's fine. That can all be accommodated. So on this map here, our hotel is situated about here on the on Porteous Bay. So lovely views out across the bay here. And some of the areas that we visit around about include the Albufeira Marsh, which is the largest wetland in Majorca, and a little bit misleading on this map because that looks like one great big lake, but actually it's mostly reed bed with little pools and wader habitat dotted around the outside, really. A little bit closer to home, in fact, right next to the hotel is a smaller reserve called the Albufeira, which essentially means the small Albufeira. And that is literally right outside the hotel. We can look out across that even before breakfast, should we choose. And then going further afield, we have a little place called the Bokker Valley just up here, which I'll start with in a moment. And then the lovely twisty mountain road that takes us right to the end of Cap de Formentor, with the lighthouse at the end here, and the something like 600-foot high cliffs that are there. And then the highest point of the island is over here, Puy Major, and just underneath it is one of the reservoirs, Crewe, Embalse de Crewe, which is this reservoir marked on the map here. So we take this lovely little mountain drive up to the reservoir to go and have a look at some of the mountain birds up there. It's one of these reservoirs that's man-made with a dam, so essentially a flooded valley. So it's rather deep, not a good site for wetland birds, but it's surrounded by lovely hills covered in all sorts of interesting plants. And it's the area where we go to look for some of the more interesting mountain birds. So I'll move on to the next slide. Oh, I can't see my notes. I should mention that we were trying to figure out before we went live how I could see my notes, and I didn't figure it out. So I'm sort of making it up as I go along, I'm afraid. So I might be surprised by my slides now and again. But essentially, I put this in to say that if you're lucky and you have a window seat, you can see the island nicely before you even land. And this is the view of Cap de Formentor running out with the lighthouse at the end here, and gives you a lovely feeling even before you touch down of the lovely ruggedness of that northern chain of limestone mountains. The hotel itself, it's very, very nice grounds. It's nice and green. It's not a tall, high-rise block like many touristy hotels. All of the rooms are just 2-story, so you get either a ground floor or a first floor room in slightly varying styles and designs. But this was just one of the pictures that I borrowed from their website just to illustrate really the attractiveness of the grounds. You do get 1 or 2 nice birds actually in the grounds themselves. And just a picture of a typical room, so you get a feeling. It's a fairly typical hotel, no real surprises. I will say the pictures, it's sort of a low resolution. I got it off the hotel website, but the reason I did that was if I took a picture of my own room, it's a guide's room, so it'd be quite horrific with stuff lying around all over the place and wouldn't be very representative of a decent room. So I'll move on and just say the food is just absolutely wonderful. And this was just a picture I took of one of the starters, to be honest. And if you're a vegetarian, I apologize. They do cater for vegetarians. They cater for all sorts of dietary requirements there. It's all buffet style, so you can help yourself. You can take as little or as much as you like. And it's absolutely wonderful. And if nothing else, you can at least start your species list while you're having your first dinner, I guess. So let's move on to outdoors. On our first morning, we tend to go stay rather locally and go to the Bokker Valley, which is quite famous amongst bird watchers as a good starting point for any visit to Majorca. And it's very typical of the habitats up in the hills, where you've got this low Mediterranean scrub, a combination of maquis and the taller stuff in the foreground, and garrigue, which is the low stuff on the hills here, mostly dominated by a lovely tall grass called Ampelodesmos, which has very long leaves, rather like pampas grass. Lots of that along the valley here. And these lovely little dwarf fan palms as well, which are native to the southwest Mediterranean region. And I put this one in first because it's an example of my abilities with a camera, but I'm not really making apologies for it, because I hope that if you want to get a really good look at this bird, then you'll actually come on the trip. So there's a little bit of ploy there. But anyway, this on our first morning is hopefully our first endemic bird. This is Balearic Warbler, which was split by the wonderful taxonomists from Marmora's Warbler. So it's a very range restricted species now, and Majorca is the best place to see it. The Bokker Valley is a really good place to see it, and we have a couple of little spots we know where the birds have a tendency to show reasonably well. But of course, because I'm busy trying to show it to other people, I'm not busy pointing a lens at it. So hopefully you'll have more luck. But we've got that picture out the way, so some of the other pictures are hopefully a little bit better. Again, the taxonomists have been busy, and spotted flycatcher has been split. So the form that you get on Majorca is the Mediterranean flycatcher, which is rather plainer than our spotted flycatcher, without such a strongly streaked chest to it. Real cuties, and they can actually be surprisingly tame on Majorca. They're quite common there, which is refreshing to be able to say. And we usually do get good looks at those on both the spring and the autumn trips. They're normally still there in September when we're doing our autumn trips. Another bird that's a regional endemic, woodchat shrike, but this is a race that's found in the Balearic Islands and Corsica and Sardinia. Very much like your typical woodchat shrike, but without a little white patch in the base of the wing here. So nothing to write home about if you've seen woodchat shrike, but woodchat shrikes are always lovely anyway. And the little wooded fields at the bottom of the valley are always a great place to see them. Hoopoes are always very desirable. They're plentiful on Majorca. They're more or less resident there now with the milder winters that we're getting. So spring and autumn, we usually see good numbers of hoopoes, and they do breed there in holes in walls and similar places. And also likewise other classic Mediterranean birds such as bee-eater as well, of course, which move through as passage migrants, particularly in the spring. By September, they've normally gone back through. So bee-eaters tend to be a spring bird. While we're in the Bokker Valley, we'll have a look at a few of the plants that are there. If you come on the autumn trip, you get a chance to see this lovely plant, which is called sea squill, comes up from a bulb, and the flowers come up in the autumn. There's a close-up on the left and a larger picture, or a more sort of a landscape view of it on the right-hand side there, and some other endemics that occur in the area as well, particularly in Bokker Valley. The little Astragalus balearicus and Tucrium subspinosum are typical what they call hedgehog plants, which are plants that have adapted to survive being constantly nibbled by goats by having small leaves tucked down amongst these very spiny stems and leaf endings. And on the right-hand side, Hypericum balearicum, flowers, you can tell it's a typical St. John's wort, but they have these amazing encrusted and wavy-edged leaves to them, which are really quite different. And it's a perennial shrub as well. It's not something that dies down like our native St. John's worts do. Back to the birds, the Bokker Valley is a good place to get your first taste of booted eagles, which essentially replace buzzards on Majorca. Buzzards is scarce or simply a passage migrant in Majorca, but booted eagles are quite common and widespread, and you see them in just the way that you see buzzards in the UK. Booted eagles come in two colour forms. You get them both on Majorca, the dark form on the left and the pale morph on the right-hand side there, the pale ones normally being more typical and more frequent in occurrence. By the time we've walked for a couple of hours and stopped and looked at things, we'll be at the far end of the Bokker Valley. We don't go right down to the beach, but there's this lovely overlook which just catches the edge of the Formentor Peninsula on the right there, running way into the distance, and just such gorgeous scenery. It really is fabulous during spring or autumn. It's a wonderful, wonderful place to be. On the way back, one further plant, which I will show you if you're very, very good, is Sibhthorpia Africana. And despite that name Africana, it's a bit of a misnomer because this plant is actually endemic to Majorca and related, if you know a plant called Cornish moneywort. If you've been down in the southwest or you live down that way, you may know Cornish moneywort. This is in the same genus as that, but it has much brighter yellow flowers and lives in some funny little tucked away places in the mountains of Majorca. Spectacular scenery is something that you could come very close to getting tired of in Majorca, but it truly is fabulous. This is a little mirador that we normally stop at on the way to the Formentor Peninsula or on the way back. It just gives you a fabulous view looking out along the northern side of the peninsula. And our destination on this day is Cap Formentor, right by the lighthouse. As I say, we're about 600 feet above sea level here. And again, it's just such a great place for looking for birds and some of the endemic plants that occur on Majorca. And as you can see, hopefully everyone's looking wistfully and hopefully out to sea or downward and looking around for birds flying about overhead. And one of the key birds that you get here is Eleanor's falcon, which is an amazing species of bird of prey because they nest colonially and they nest late in the season so that they can feed their young on autumn migrating songbirds. They breed across much of the Mediterranean, but almost exclusively on offshore islands. They breed right around as far as the northernmost tip of the Canaries, and then right the way through the Mediterranean eastwards to Greece. But they migrate out of the Mediterranean through the Red Sea area and spend the winter in Madagascar. So fabulous birds, always a must-see species when you go to Majorca. Spring trips in April can be a little bit touch and go, but normally the first birds are just starting to arrive then. Because they breed late, they tend to be slightly later arriving. But the autumn trips, they're always around during September. I'm just looking at the time and I'm going to rush up a little bit, I think. So blue rock thrush is another bird that is pretty much guaranteed. There are several pairs on territory at Cap Formentor. And then one of the other reasons to go there, and these are a little bit distant through the lens, but they look fabulous through the scope. And these are Scopoli's shearwaters, which breed and feed around Majorca and can be found around there for much of the year. And what you need to get a spectacle like this is for a nice shoal of bluefin tuna to come through, and the shearwaters follow them through and pick up food from them. And you can pick out one or two. There's a little one here, one or two Balearic shearwaters in amongst them as well. Some of the endemic plants, the peculiar Lornia cervicornis on the left, which is actually a sow thistle, though it doesn't look like one, and one of the lovely rock sea lavenders that grows there. Both these two species endemic to just Majorca and Menorca. Up in the mountains, Puig Mayor, the highest point of the island, and Coubert Reservoir, which we'll walk around and have a look for a nice few birds. A great spot for wryneck, which is resident on the island and can be found spring and autumn. It can be a good place for tawny pipit as well, and some of the Sylvia warblers that occur on the island, but also a great place to look for the two vulture species that are there in small numbers, griffon vulture here and black vulture, which is the one people are always keen to see with that lovely sawtooth trailing edge to its wing. More endemic plants and regional plants. The Erica multiflora will be in flower in good numbers on the autumn trip. The spring trip on the left, Cyclamen balearicum, endemic to the Balearics, but also just a couple of little spots in southeast France. And then the endemic Balearic crocus on the right-hand side there. That's an autumn flowering species of crocus. And so the end of the first day, you get a lovely view out the back and a kind of promise of what's to come. And that leads me into wetland birds and wetland habitats. Orchids are always desirable. So 3 species of orchid here, bog orchid and mirror orchid, reasonably common on the spring trips. And then autumn ladies' tresses just in 1 or 2 little places, but not far from the hotel on the autumn trips. And birds in these kind of wet hinterlands, sitting cisticolas or fantail warblers, as you may know them, can be quite common and approachable in some places in the wetlands. Some birds less approachable and more skulking, like little bittern along the canals as we walk out to the wetlands, and the highly desirable moustached warbler, which people always like to try and see, but it's always a real pain to get a look at. But they're there, and we will look for them, and we'll keep our fingers crossed for moustached warbler. Waders come through in spring in good numbers. It's always a treat to see literally flocks of wood sandpipers coming through amongst the breeding avocets. And then later in the year, well, spring or autumn really, you just find that birds can come really close. There's some well-placed hides that we'll spend a little bit of time in, and you just get fabulous views of birds like this little ringed plover, black-winged stilt as well, taken at the Albufeira Marsh, glossy ibis. That's an autumn shot, a nice streaky-headed juvenile. And the lovely Spanish yellow wagtail, the Iberian yellow wagtail, which breeds on Majorca and mainland Spain with the lovely blue-grey head and white throat. It's quite different to our yellow wagtail. And again, right underneath the hide. And on a recent trip I did, this osprey, which almost bizarrely came and landed right next to the hide. It was too close to actually get it all in shot. So I couldn't get the whole bird in photograph. It was so close to the hide, just sitting on the ground outside. And this one just reminded me that sometimes the birds are so close that you wonder who's watching who. And this Kentish plover just walked right up to the hide and started looking in at us as we were looking out at it. So always good photo opportunities there, and always plenty of birds to see. Other birds to see on the island in the wetlands, Audouin's gull can produce surprisingly good opportunities when they come and bathe on the freshwater canal at the Albufeira, as they did on one of my recent trips there. And then a few other birds that have actually been introduced to Majorca to bolster falling populations or to increase populations that are currently all elsewhere, so they haven't got all their eggs in one basket. So red-crested pochard was introduced and was doing reasonably well, but seems to be getting a little bit scarce, but there are still a few around on the island. Marble duck has partially colonized the island itself as a vagrant, but also a few birds introduced to bolster the population there, so gives a chance to see the lovely marble duck. Unfortunately, this one's fast asleep. The swamp hens, purple gallinule as was, but we now call it western swamp hen, have been introduced too, and they're doing really well on the Albufeira after having been hunted out initially some years ago. So they've been introduced since the 1990s. And the wonderful crested coot, or red-knobbed coot as it's now known, beautiful birds. This is an attempt to introduce it to Majorca, so that the whole population isn't just in one part of Spain, but they are struggling a little bit. And there's normally only 2 or 3 of them around, but hopefully we'll get to see those on our next visit too. And because I like crested coot so much, I put another picture of them in because they really are wonderful little birds. And I think that kind of takes us to the traditional shot at the end of the talk, but I flipped it on its head because actually this is a sunrise. And it firstly shows you that there's reason to get up early in the morning just to see such a wonderful view from immediately outside the hotel. And also it's a sunrise because my talk is first, so I wanted it to be a lead-in to the next talk rather than the end of the evening. So that was me. Kerrie, I think it's back to you if you're there, and we'll lead on, in fact, to Jessica, I think, is the next one, who will be coming up any moment.
Right, how are we doing? Can everyone hear me now? So
yeah, all good, Jessica. Yeah.
So thanks for that, Mike. That's brilliant. I've led that trip in the autumn and it is a wonderful place to go to. I'm going to be talking about Puglia in spring, Puglia being in southern Italy. And here's the south tip of Italy with its heel and its toe. We've been going, Naturetrek been going to the Gargano Peninsula here for a long time, but this trip takes us down to this part. I've got a message in the middle of my screen. I hope other people can't see it. Anyway, it's gone now. We fly into Bari, which is here, and rather than going up that way, we come down this way. And it's a two-center trip. The first half of the week, we're based down here near the Capo d'Otranto, right down at the southern end of Italy. And then we go into the rolling hills north of Taranto, round here. And you can see from here that Naples is rather further away than Corfu and Albania. So we're actually, you can see them from the coast on a clear day. And people often find that they get welcome to Greece little messages on their phone when we stand at the lighthouse over here. The first hotel we stay at is only a couple of fields in from the sea. There's the sea. This is a view from the terrace with the main part of the hotel behind us. And it's a glorious hotel, converted farmhouse. This is the accommodation area down here. So it's a split level hotel, although there is some, there are some rooms on a courtyard up there. You don't have to sleep in the cave. There are usually scops owls in these trees behind the hotel, and the sparrows roost in the palms just outside. In the scrubby land just round the hotel, you've got all sorts of different flowers like field gladiolus and cistus, honeywort, endemic rock roses, Helianthemum jonium here, much narrower leaf than our ordinary rock rose. One of the things about this area is that because it's so far east, you do get various species that are distributed mainly around the Adriatic. So they have this small population in Italy, and then they're found in Albania, in Greece, up in the Balkans, and so on. And it's also a good spot for migrating birds. And this is the Capo d'Otranto, where the Adriatic Sea up here meets the Ionian Sea down here. It's worth having a good scan of the sea to see if there are any shearwaters going past, any dolphins. Had a nice pod of Risso's dolphins last time that showed well. And also looking for migrants coming in off the sea. Another bird that we had good views of was Ordwin's gull, just off the sea. And some nice groups of bee-eaters often coming in, sitting on power lines and on fences. It's a good spot for harriers on migration, and we've done 3 trips there, and we've had excellent views so far of marsh hen and Montes harriers in the area. The key one that we've not yet managed, but it is a spot that's known for it if you happen to hit the right time on migration, is pallid harrier. And we very much hope that we will be able to see them maybe this coming year. Last time we also had several booted eagles coming over, and also Vanellis at different times. On the first day, we normally go not much further than the lighthouse in the morning, but we explore the rocky pastures that are quite close to the sea, with lots of beautiful Jerusalem sage, pyramidal orchids, and there's this bellflower here, Asinuma lamonifolia, which is one of those that just turns up in the very southeast of Italy and then the other side of the Adriatic. So it's in the Campanulaceae bellflower. And as I say, lots and lots of pyramidal orchids around, and there will also be other orchids tucked in here, and lots of other flowers as well, and insects. Star of Bethlehem, Orthogolum gasonii, one that has a fairly southern distribution. Day-flying moth here, Ragusa's 9-spotted moth, which is different from the 9-spotted that you find further north in Italy. Very similar in structure, but the white markings on the wing are different. Italian marbled white is another very beautiful butterfly, and showing its colours here as it was resting. It was a bit cloudy on that day. Italian war lizards bask on the sunny rocks. And you get a variety of passerines perching up on shrubs and fences and so on. Windchat here, we've had rock thrush, shrikes, that sort of thing. It's not amazingly birdy as an area, and you can never guarantee migration because it depends so much on the season and the weather conditions, but we do often see a very interesting selection of birds. And back to the plants, another one with a very eastern distribution is this figwort, Scrofularia Lucida. There's a small population in southern France, but then it's in this southern Italy and across in Greece. And figworts are pollinated by flies. Just happened to see that there was one in this flower that I'd photographed. Another one that's pan-Adriatic is this swallowwort, subspecies Adriaticum, has greeny yellowy flowers, whereas the nominate species has white flowers. And Vincitoxicum tells you it's a bit poisonous. The scrub nearby, cheerful with cistus, pink and white cistus. We've got Mediterranean daphne there, Daphne nidium, and lots of this thorny broom, Calicotomy infesta. And further up the coast where it's a bit more sandy, you find rosemary, and you find a very colourful flora, lots of this catchfly, Silene colorata. On the sand dunes, there's cottonweed, Achillea maritima, used to be a canthus. Southern bird's foot trefoil, Lotus creticus there, and an endemic stalkspill with much larger flowers than the ordinary stalkspill, Erodium nervulosum. If the season's right, we get some fantastic, really striking broom rapes, Orobanche sanguinea, these very dramatic maroon ones that parasitize lotus species. And orchids. As Mike says, orchids are always popular. And this is the Apulian orchid, Ophrys phagotes, subspecies Apulica. The next day we go further up the coast to Lecesine, which is a series of lakes that we walk a path through towards the coast. Depending on the water level, depends on how much of the path we can manage, because it does often get waterlogged or even flooded. But so we don't always manage to get right through to the coast beyond. You usually find some egrets, herons, small numbers of duck on the water, but they're not full of bird life. But again, you get some fascinating plants, including orchids, lax-flowered orchid, bumblebee orchid, bug orchid, all around here. And there are terrapins in the lake, and this baby was trying a baby-sized lake in a puddle on the path. European pond terrapin. Then where we park back from our walk, there's some magnificent olive groves, really colourful flowers underneath. They maintain traditional farming methods to maintain the flora. And you've got the wonderful seed heads here of Porteous. You've got greater Venus looking glass. You've got corn marigolds. You've got poppies. You've got this trigonella, the fenugreek. Lots and lots of different flowers. And these fairly old olive trees. Now this was taken in 2019, which was the last time we went. And sadly, you can see that some of these olive trees are looking a bit sick, because you may be aware that in Puglia, they've been hit by a devastating bacterial infection called Xylella fastidiosa, that's a bit like our ash dieback, and it affects the olives, and it's killed most of the olives in southern Puglia. It's gradually moving northwards, and it is now in the Balearics, it's in mainland Spain, it's in Portugal, and there's a lot of concern about it. It was imported into southern Puglia to Gallipoli, they think in an exotic garden centre plant, and it's nipped onto the olives and is really causing devastation. But they are discovering some resistant strains, so there is hope. But in the 2 years that we've not been there, I dread to think how the landscape may have changed. But birds that we hope to see, you can get lovely hoopoes, thanks to Ron Brown for this photo, and woodchat shrike, and then Sardinian warblers, eastern subalpine warblers. We had a rather fun conehead mantis nymph one year, it's posing very handsomely. And this is a large yellow-headed wasp, but only the female has the yellow head. The male has these amazing yellow thick antennae, Megascolia bidens, on some galactites there. Then we move northwards to our second base in the rolling hills north of Taranto. And there are two hotels there that we've been using. There was one that we used the first couple of years that then closed for refurbishment. And so we moved up the road about a mile away to this hotel. But both hotels incorporate the very traditional local architecture style of trulli, these conical roofs that you find not only on hotels, but on local houses as well. And again, both hotels are lovely, excellent food, characterful hotels, quite large establishments, but there's plenty of space for everyone. And the first hotel, it particularly has got amazing grounds. So last time we went, although we couldn't stay at that hotel, we did get permission to visit their grounds. because of the flora and fauna of the grounds. But in general, it's a more pastoral area than further south, which is more intensive olives and agriculture. Here we've got fields with dry stone walls, the local cattle, Podolica cattle, and scrubby woodland and so on. And where there's one of the key species that you have is the Macedonian oak, again, eastern distribution. It's in the name Macedonia, Quercus trojana. And where there's not cattle grazing, lots and lots of orchids. We've got naked man orchid here. Then there's the man with his clothes on, man orchid, Orchis santiphora. We've got sawfly orchids. We've got dark ophrys, yellow bee orchids. This one is a small patterned orchid, Parvimaculata, and all sorts of variations and hybrids and so on in between. And that's not a complete list. There isn't time for everything. Pink butterfly orchids, green-winged orchids, Bertoloni's bee orchids, just wonderful displays and tremendous quantities of all these fantastic orchids. If the season is late, so things are flowering later, you may see giant orchids, which we did in 2019. If it's an early season, then the lizard orchids are in flower, as they were the first time we went. One day we drive west to the city of Matera, which is a fascinating city on the edge of a gorge. And you've got the very modern over there, but the more modern city here. But underneath you've got cave dwellings, and it's the second most continuously occupied town after Petra, because these caves were used as family homes until the 50s, 60s. They were cleared out, and they're now being redeveloped, some of them as hotel rooms and so on. But you've got rock cut churches and homes and cisterns and so on underneath the more modern buildings. And Matera also happens to hold the largest colony of lesser kestrel in Italy, and we usually see plenty of those, get lovely views. We start off the day by going to the plain opposite the town. There's a gorge down there, which you can see is full of colour and lots of endemic or semi-endemic plants, this flax, golden drops, this stock, and hairgrass, all sorts of fantastic plants, and of course more orchids, in case you hadn't had enough. And looking up, then there's lots of lesser kestrels, the swifts, there are other things, that black kites around and so on. Different yellow asphodel here, Asphodelini labernica, again, an eastern distribution one. And then we also go over to the Laterza Gorge one day, and we walk mainly along the top. You see it's a steep gorge with a river running down it. Good place for lanner falcons there, and also black stork nest in the gorge. Had geckos there, and there's Kochki's gecko in the gorge. I've not seen one there yet. That's a Moorish one. Had this little scorpion as well. Butterflies around, scarce swallowtail, southern festoon, eastern dappled white, lots of different butterflies. Back at the hotel one year, we had a number of great peacock moths, which are fantastic, enormous moths, and rhinoceros beetle. So enjoying absolutely everything. Here we've got another local place that we visit, the Bosco De La Pianella, which is a dolina where the arid ground level is here, and it's a collapsed cavern. And the further you go down into the cavern, the more humid it gets, and you have going from evergreen plants down into deciduous and ferns in the understory. and so on. And you've got some wonderful, enormous trees there, this home oak. So that, again, it's a fascinating place to visit. So Puglia has something for everybody. In the spring, the weather can be a bit mixed. Mediterranean springs aren't always unbroken sunshine, but if you do get the rain, then it's usually followed by the sun and some fantastic rainbows. And thanks to everybody.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Thanks to Mike before you. So we're going to take a short break now. We will be back at 8:25. So you've got 10 minutes to go and recharge your glasses, grab something to eat, whatever you'd like to do, and we'll see you at 8:25. And I'll be taking you to the Swiss Alps. Welcome back, everybody. I hope that wasn't too disconcerting, looking at a beautiful view of the Matterhorn in Switzerland to the background of sort of Spanish guitar and lapping waves. I'm not quite sure about that. Bear with me one moment. I'm going to take us over to Switzerland. Let's get organised. Sorry, I've got a little box in the way. It's connecting, moving that now. Great. So for the next 20 minutes, I am going to take you to, as I keep saying every time I do a webinar or any sort of talk, one of my favourite places in the world, and that is the Swiss Alps. And I'll talk through some of the different locations that we go in the Swiss Alps and a few of our different holidays and some of the marvellous things you can see there, including these stunning views. So hope this all looks okay to you and is nicely full screen. I hope one of the other panelists can quickly tell me if it's not looking right, but hopefully it does, so I'll get cracking. So we visit a few different places in Switzerland now. I'm going to kick off with a map, so to give you a bit of context of where we're going. This is Wengen. This is our original Swiss Alps tour. And the next one that we'll talk about is Pontresina, right over here in the east of Switzerland. We'll then hop back to Bettmeralp and Everlen, our newest addition to our Swiss portfolio. For all of these tours, we fly into either Zurich Airport here or Geneva here. And for all but one of them, we take the train. It's really nice to not have to worry about minibuses on these particular tours. And sometimes it can seem a little bit intimidating when you get your flight ticket and then your train ticket, and you can see that there's 3 or 4 different trains to get you to a destination with connections to make. But let me assure you that this is Switzerland and it's absolutely seamless. Generally, you get on your train, you pull into the next station. It looks like it might be quite tight with a 5-minute connection between these trains, but you just get your suitcase, you step off one, the next train arrives on the opposite platform, you step onto the next train and you carry on. That's how Switzerland works. And it's a real pleasure. It's a beautiful journey. It's very relaxing. It's a great way to arrive at your hotel. And in particular, if this is your journey, then you're in for a treat. So we'll start off in Wengen and the Lauterbrunnen Valley. So again, it is 3 trains from Zurich, getting to Lauterbrunnen in the valley. And then from there, you take the Cogwheel Mountain Railway up to Wengen. And this is your transport for the week. It's a car-free town, so there's no worry about getting run over along the way. There's the odd electric vehicle hopping around, but that's about it. We have a Jungfrau pass for the week, and that gets you on all of these trains, the cable cars, and all over this entire area. It also gives you quite a lot of flexibility. So if there's ever a day that you want to do a little bit less than the main group, or you want to do your own thing or head home early, that's absolutely fine. You've got your pass, so you can head back down on the train or whatever it is that you'd like to do, if that's something that works for you. We stay at a lovely hotel called the Berghaus Hotel, and we've been staying there for years and years and years, since I've been at Naturetrek 10 years and well before I ever joined. We looked after by Family Fontaine. They are marvellous. They look after our guests really well, and all of our Swiss hotels are lovely. They all have fairly simple rooms, but simple in a nice way, not in a basic budget way, just in a very Swiss way. They're lovely, good food. Not too much cheese, so don't worry. A decent amount. We're in Switzerland, and we'll cater for you well on the picnic lunches. Yeah, really lovely places to stay. And this is our backdrop for the week. So we have the impressive peaks of the Eiger, the Munch, and the Jungfrau. So the Eiger is on the left here, and the Eiger is the ogre. The Munch is in the middle. That's the monk. And this is the Jungfrau, and that's the young girl. So the monk is protecting the young girl from that mighty ogre. This photo is actually taken across the valley in Mürren. So we're across the valley from where we're staying in Wengen. This is actually the base for our go slow in the Swiss Alps tour, where we stay in Mürren for the week. It's really nice if you want to do a little bit less walking. It's got a lot of built-in flexibility. So even more so than just having that pass, Each day is designed so that you can just do a half day, and you don't feel like you're abandoning the trip if you go home early. Lots of flexibility built in, lots of different options for walks. So there's a longer walk and a shorter walk. So it's designed for people who want to perhaps do a little bit less walking. We are in the Swiss Alps, so there's always going to be walking when you're in the Swiss Alps. But the go slow is a really nice option if you fancy doing a little bit less and taking it easy and having the afternoon off to visit the beautiful warm swimming pool nearby, that sort of thing. And above Wengen itself, here we are on the Mannlichen, and here the view is dominated by the north face of the Eiger. And you can just see that in the springtime, the turf is absolutely filled with primulas, with gentians, with ranunculus. There's so many fabulous flowers. It really is a dream. Second half of June basically is the time to go. We go same sort of 2 weeks every year, and I always get calls in the office asking me which is the best week to go, and I can't tell you the answer to that because it just depends on the season. Occasionally we've gone the first week and the higher slopes have been buried in the snow still. Occasionally we go and the second week everything's it's been getting really hot, but because we're in the mountains, you can go higher and you can go lower, so we can adapt our trip and go to the altitude where there is still going to be fantastic flora. So my answer really is it doesn't matter. Pick the better week for you. They're both going to be absolutely marvellous, and you'll be seeing things like this, these trumpet gentians, lots of spring gentians, Gentiana verna. And just a few more examples really here. We've got narcissus flowered anemone on the top left, alpine toad flax on top right. The lovely bottom left is alpine pasque flower, and then one of my absolute favourites, this Trollius europaeus or globe flowers, which I always think just like little balls of sunlight up there in the mountains, absolutely beautiful. We can expect to see lots of primulas as well. So these are Primula farinosa on the left and Primula auricula on the right, and that's the bear's ear primrose. And then higher up, there are some real specialties. So just where the glacier is receding, we'll head up one day and go to the edge of the Eiger Glacier. This is one of the things we might find. This is Viola sinesia. Another special flower to see on this particular trip is this Alpine columbine, the Aquilegia alpina. And then one day, a real highlight will be the beautiful lady slipper orchids. Now there's a spot for these orchids on our Wengen tour, where we'll head over a little bit of the mountain, and if you time it right, so again, I don't know which of those 2 weeks will be the best one, but they'll be there regardless. Whether they're absolute prime is anyone's guess, but one of those weeks will nail it. And you can look up the mountainside and you just see hundreds, in fact thousands of lady slipper orchids, all the way stretching right up the mountainside from where you are. So in terms of the walking, it is quite variable. As I said before, we're in the Swiss Alps, so it's not flat, but we take our time, and the nature of botany is that we are pretty slow and very slow, and it's an easy pace. We tend to not travel so far in the morning, so we'll take our transport, we'll get on the train, we'll get on the cable car. Sometimes we'll do a combination of both to get to wherever we're going for the day. Often we'll then spend quite a lot of the rest of the morning pottering around, finding all the new flowers. There'll be lots to see, lots to identify, so we'll take our time, and then we'll have a picnic lunch and do more walking after lunch. This particular photo is one of the tougher walks that we do. I still wouldn't say it's tough, but we're walking down the moraine from the Eiger Collector station. So here walking poles are really useful. And as you can see, mountain weather, always variable. I would say always come prepared. The week that I was out with this group, we were really lucky. It was a heat wave in Switzerland, which in the mountains means you just have beautiful blue skies and it's nice and warm, but not hot every day, which is absolutely perfect. Except for this one afternoon, it was bright blue skies when we set off from the top station. It clouded over, it hailed, and then by the time we got down to the cafe and we're eating apricot tart, it was beautifully sunny again. So you just need to come prepared for all eventualities, really. And of course, one of the highlights of any Naturetrek trip in the mountains is the famous Naturetrek picnic lunch, which we'll do in style in Wengen with lots of delicious local produce. We'll find a lovely spot to sit in under the mountains and enjoy ourselves. This particular one, our fantastic leader, David Tattersfield, appears to have trained a nutcracker to respond to little chunks of gruyere. They are clever birds. I believe that they can even pretend to hide seeds to confuse others that might be watching them. They can remember the location of 20 to 30,000 seeds. This particular one remembers that Naturetrek groups come every year and get throw chunks of Gruyere into the riverbed for it. Moving over to the other side of Switzerland, Pontresina became our base for our second holiday to the Swiss Alps, where the very different geology and the high altitude make it home to some very interesting alpines. Now, Pontresina is in the canton of Graubünden, which is the only trilingual canton in Switzerland. So this is where German, Italian, and Romansh, which is is a Latin-based language, but only a very small percentage of population speak it, but it is an official language still. So it's a real blend, a real mishmash, and it can get quite confusing, wondering what you should be saying and who you're talking to. But in Switzerland, they are absolutely fantastic at languages, and they'll all speak English too if you're at all worried about it. Again, we are absolutely spoilt by our transport for the week. So we get around using the UNESCO Heritage Bernina Express line. So it's got some amazing loops and tunnels that we can explore. So for many, I mean, for me, the transport itself was a real highlight of this particular trip. We also take cable cars in this one, and even the odd bus. So we do use wheels occasionally. And once again, you've got a pass, so you're free to do your own thing if you ever need to or want to. If you want to get back to the hotel early, then you've got your pass, and you can do that if you wish. So we're really high up here. So this was taken in even in July's fantastic little Edelweiss, but even then it's still not quite out. So we're so high up at this point that going in very end of June and then the first 2 weeks of July, we're still seeing some amazing alpines just starting to appear. We'll take the cable cars to go really high up some days, so sometimes over 3,000 metres, and we'll be looking for some real high altitude specialties around here with the Bernina group of peaks that you can see there, filing an amazing backdrop and that glacier coming down from them. It's really remarkable, I think, what grows at these altitudes. So this is a little mignonette leaf a Cardamomini residifolia. We'll see lots of this lovely one. This is a Glacier Crowfoot. And then if you see these pink splashes in the rocks, it's one of my absolute favourites. This is an alpine rock jasmine, Androssus alpina. And then if you're heading up from the cable cars and you see these blue splashes of colour in the rock, then it's most likely to be this Erythricium nanum, the king of the Alps. There's a different selection of primulas up here. So this one's a Primula latifolia, and this one's then a Primula integrifolia. And you also get lots of hybrids between the two, which can get nicely confusing. Good job we've got an expert botanist in David Tattersfield there to help us out and remind us of what everything is as many times as we possibly could want to ask him. And you can see that even this is taken in July, we're still up here in the snow melt, so the snow is just receding. And where the snow is receding and melting, you can see here in the turf, it's really very purple. And that's all the soldanellas, as well as those primulas, but these soldanellas that appear as soon as the snow is melted, or even just before it's gone, popping through the snow itself. These beautiful snowbells, it's something really as far back as you can see, absolutely beautiful. Of course, once again, we have some excellent picnic spots. This is one of my absolute favourite picnic spots of any Naturetrek trip I've ever been on, mostly because we were sitting here and there is a cafe nearby where normally you could pop to use the loo, which is always a very important consideration, especially I think for us ladies on these trips. But it was closed, which is a bit of a disaster. And there weren't that many handy rocks nearby. So I was just pondering what we should do, and lo and behold, a helicopter arrived with a portaloo swinging from it. I kid you not, this actually happened. A helicopter just came along with the portaloo, it then lowered it down just behind where our picnic spot was, and off it went, and that was it. We could go and use the portaloo. It was almost like we'd booked it. We hadn't. I probably should have pretended we did, but that was just incredible. That's Swiss efficiency for you. Moving on, the newest additions to our Swiss portfolio Naturetrek are two tours that we run in the canton of Valais. Valais actually is a bilingual canton, so extending along the Rhone Valley from Geneva. It starts off French, so Valais, and then it becomes Swiss and becomes Wallis. The first tour, the highlights of Valley tour, it's in Bettmer Alp, is in a German-speaking area. And then our latest tour, the Swiss Alps in summer, is in Evelyn, which is a French-speaking part of Valais. So both of these tours, we fly into Geneva. This is Bettmer Alp. So for this tour, we take the train again all the way around the lake and then up the valley. And then after changing to a little local line, you get off at Betten and take a cable car, the very last leg of the trip. It's quite fun. So you're piling up your suitcase and restaurants bringing up big crates of wine and all sorts. So it's quite good fun. And once again, you're in a car-free town. So it's a lovely place to base yourself. And we stay in another really nice family-run hotel. I think some of the best feedback I've ever got from a European hotel is from this one, the Backhof. And then once again, we're botanizing at a range of altitudes. And for some of our days, this will be the amazing backdrop. This is the Aletsch Glacier, which is the largest glacier in the Alps. It's 23 kilometers long and extends from those 3 peaks we saw earlier. So if you were this blue person stood and looking round the corner, you'd be able to see the Eiger, the Munch and the Jungfrau, and the glacier extending all the way down this valley from those 3 peaks. So as I said, we're botanizing again at a range of altitudes with this amazing scenery behind us. So we've got some more Glacier Crowfoot here. And we're also using some chairlifts on this trip, which is quite fun. This is a St. Bruno's lily, really beautiful lily. Lots of mountain house leeks. This is a white musky saxifrage. This is a lovely little one, a Glacier Mousseer, Cerastium uniflorum. Our Highlights of Valais trip has been designed to be a bit more of an all-rounder sort of tour. So the ones I was talking about before are fairly botany based. I mean, you'll still be seeing other things. You'll be seeing birds and butterflies as you go around, beautiful scenery, obviously, but they are primarily botanical tours. Highlights of Valais is designed to appeal to the all-rounders amongst you. So plenty of botany still, but also opportunities to look for other things. So just above the hotel, there's a really lovely area where marmots generally found to be breeding. So you can head up on the chairlift, listen for those noisy whistles, and you're very likely to spot a marmot or two. The Swiss Alps is a fabulous place for butterflies too. We actually run a dedicated butterfly trip to Wengen as well, on which we quite often will see over 100 species during our week, and that's when we're out each day looking for them. Even on this more generalist tour, we might well see perhaps over 50 species of butterfly. So here we have spotted fritillary. We have scarce copper. This chap is a mountain clouded yellow. This is an alpine heath. Then this little one is a Glandon blue, spotted on our Swiss Alps in the summer tour. And you can see some of these amazing butterfly balls as well. And sometimes you'll be walking along a path and they're just, butterflies are just covering the path. You almost try not to tread on them. In terms of birding, so not the most prolific bird list that you're going to come back from the Swiss Alps, but there's some really nice things to see. Alpine Chubs are prolific, especially when there's an Naturetrek picnic involved. They'll be there trying to share your apricot tart or your gruyere, whatever it is that you happen to be enjoying at the time. As you head higher up the slopes, you can look for these lovely higher specialists. So Alpine Accenta there and snow buntings. And then particularly on our newest tour, so Swiss Alps in summer, where we stay in the little village of Evelyn, so across the valley from where I've been talking about, there's some really nice birding opportunities. And that is a much birdier tour, actually. If you are a birder and want to go to the Swiss Alps, then do take a look at our newest tour, Swiss Alps in summer, which Brian Small will be leading this year, heading down into the forests and along the valleys. And that tour, you have a vehicle, so you have ability to get to quite a few different destinations a bit further afield. So we'll be down the forest looking for little firecrests like this chap, some of those wonderful nutcrackers again, willow tit, and then as we're venturing all over the Alps, there's opportunities to look overhead for honey buzzard, lammergeiers are possible, and golden eagle is also certainly possible, so always worth keeping your eyes peeled overhead as well. Now, you can't go to Valais and not visit the mighty Matterhorn. So on both of these tours, we'll pick a suitable day, head down the valley, head towards Zermatt, and then we'll take the Gornergrat barn, which is this excellent, another cogwheel mountain railway up the mountain and head right up the Gornegrat to see what we can find up there. So again, more exciting things to look for. This is a Matterhorn pennycress, Alpine asters, all sorts up there, plenty of birds as well, the ones I mentioned earlier. You might even look for an ibex or a chamois. This is a little young ibex, and you can see them elegantly scaling the rocky squeezing mountainsides much more elegantly than any of us Naturetrek groups will ever hope to be able to do. And of course, you can finish off, hopefully we picked a beautiful sunny day and you'll have a view of the mighty Matterhorn itself. So that is a whirlwind tour around all of our Swiss tours. So I really hope you'll fancy joining us this summer or maybe next summer in Swiss Alps. I'll be here for any questions at the end. But in the meantime, I am going to hand over to Andrew, who will hopefully appear any moment. Here he is. And finish off our evening on the Isles of Scilly. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you. I'll just get my screen to share, hopefully. Oop. Sorry, I have no eyes. Hopefully we can all see that and you can all hear me. Off to the Isles of Scilly, well, much closer to home, but still something that involves a little bit of a trip, a bit of a journey. We do several trips there now, spring and summer, well, summer and late and autumn. Isles of Scilly have been famous for many years for the birding in the autumn, but there's lots to see at all times of the year. They're really spectacular flowers.
Sorry, Andrew, it's not gone full screen for me, but does it look full screen to you?
Yes. Got black margins at the edges, have you?
Do you want to just try moving on one slide? Just no, just because shaking your head as well. I can still see. It looks like it's sort of got frozen.
Okay. Well, how's that?
Just give.
Yes, several people are commenting that it's.
Yeah, no. Do you want to just
still on small screen?
Come out and just come out of your full screen and try again.
Okay, yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
How's that?
Right, so now try clicking your from beginning.
That's actually not the beginning, but
no joy there. That's
okay, how's that?
No, so it's not going to full screen.
So would it work on the tool at the bottom?
Yeah, have you got the little
the taskbar? That's moved up to the top for some reason. I don't.
So if you does it look full screen when you're looking at it? You can't see any of your other bits of PowerPoint.
No. Can you see that? Is that?
Put in slideshow. People, yeah, this is what I can see that you're pressing start slideshow.
Yeah, what's that?
That's what you pressed, and now you're looking at full screen.
Yes. Oh dear.
Oh dear.
Oh. Well, I'll just stop that again. Have one more go.
Stop that again. Have one more go.
Okay. How's that?
That's it. Yeah, we're there.
Okay. Right. Sorry about that. Little hitch
no problem.
There.
I'll leave you to
it. Okay. Well, I hope you can all see and hear. Off to the Isles of Scilly for several possibilities to go there. Trips from April and May right through in September and October. A very popular destination. Fantastic flowers to see. Interestingly, quite a few of the birds that we've seen tonight, things like the Balearic woodchat shrike, turn up on the Isles of Scilly, for example. So you have the native wildflowers and things that have been introduced from all around the world. If you've been to the Canary Islands, you'll find things you'll recognize, or if you've been to New Zealand or South Africa, you'll find some familiar plants there. There are exotic gardens. There are the bulb fields, so the wildflowers that have sort of hopped over the garden wall, and a lot of scarce natives as well. If you fly into the islands in the plane or the helicopter, you get a view of what the sort of landscape is like. Lots of tiny fields, patchwork of fields, little lanes, some wetlands, lovely sandy beaches, no dramatic high cliffs, and there are no steep hills, but we do walk everywhere. And it's another of those trips where we don't need to worry about minibuses or even public transport. Once we're there, we can get everywhere on foot. So we're about 28 miles off Land's End, a bit further, of course, by sea from Penzance. And the Selonian, the boat we go on, goes every day from Penzance, just under 3 hours to get there. But if you prefer, you could fly there, the little planes from Land's End, or now there's a helicopter service, or even from further afield from Exeter or from Newquay to get there. My personal preference is the boat, of course, because you get to see so many nice things on the sea crossing. Well, not all exotic flowers from around the world. There's still lots of places which give you an idea of what the islands would have looked like in the past. A lot of bracken and gorse scrub, which hides all the migrant birds, and lots of things to tell you that you are actually somewhere different, although we're in the UK, not quite on mainland Britain. And so things like the lesser white-toothed shrew, the Scilly shrew, as we call it, creatures that you'll see there, but not anywhere else on the mainland of Britain. And what's there, of course, would be familiar to us a lot of the time. The song thrushes people remark about because there's so many of them and they're so confiding. But then look around and you won't see a mistle thrush. That would be a great rarity. So what's not there is also quite interesting. Without much woodland, generally things like woodland birds, a jay, for example, will be a major rarity, but the song thrushes we certainly enjoy seeing. And also the starlings tell you you're somewhere different because they've got a very distinct Isles of Scilly accent. Can't really imitate it, but you'll know when you hear it. You know it's a starling, but you'll know it's something different. In the background is the Selonian, the boat that we travel on, tied up at the quay at St. Mary's under a rather threatening sky, probably getting ready to head back to the mainland. Blackbirds are fairly common there, and the Scilly blackbirds, very striking colorations, black of course, but the orange of the bill and the eye ring, much more striking than the ones we get on the mainland. The migrant birds turn up, and of course that's what attracts many of the bird watchers, particularly in the autumn. And there are lots of regular migrants. Of course, you'd expect swallows, willow warblers, chiffchaffs to be moving through in great numbers, and siskins as well. And sometimes the birds have a bit of a struggle to get there. And on one occasion, we were literally picking the birds up from the ground as they arrived at the island. So their last gasp, some of them just fluttered to the ground. Some just went straight into patches of stinging nettles to feed on the seeds. And we rescued the ones that we could. And that happens to migrant birds on a number of occasions. Terrible storms might blow them to the islands. That would be the last little scrap of land before they head out into the Atlantic. And so it really is an exciting place if you want to watch bird migration, spring and the autumn, both very good. And there are certain places and certain times of the year where you just know what you're going to see. So in September, certain spots where you'd be fairly certain to see a wryneck. Now, these are not resident birds on the island. They don't breed there, and autumn is the time to see them. But there are places that they like. They maybe stick around 2 to 3 weeks, giving everybody fairly tantalizing views sometimes, but it's just on irregulars. And snow buntings as well, a little bit later than the wrynecks will turn up. And again, there are certain spots where you just know you're going to see a snow bunting. The airfield, which you mustn't trample on, golf courses, lighthouses, the sort of places where snow buntings will turn up. Rather confused looking meadow pipit in the middle. Now we do one trip in the spring, which is flowers and gardens of the Isles of Scilly. But of course, the botanists are looking down. They don't ignore the birds, and likewise the birders generally don't ignore all the spectacular flowers that they see. There are lots of things there that are much harder to find elsewhere in Britain. So things like this, what looks at first like an ordinary white clover, is in fact Western clover. So Scilly is a real stronghold. It does turn up in Cornwall and Devon, South Wales, but Scilly is the place to go and see that. And you might think not much to get excited about. Docks don't generally figure highly on most people's tick list, but shore dock is an incredibly rare plant in Britain now, and it's possibly gone from this spot on Scilly. Rising sea levels are eroding into those particular beaches that it really likes to live on, so a really scarce plant. Boy, that's lovely fields, which sometimes have bulbs growing in them. Sadly, the bulb growing industry is declining a little bit, but neglected fields are often quite good, and areas where there's a bit of disturbance and often have really good displays. Things like this small flowered catchfly, which again is a little bit scarce on the mainland. But there is still bulb growing, and at the moment, as we speak, the bulb picking will be just about coming to a close. They're often in September, October, when you're there, the first of the narcissi are flowering. Seems a little bit odd, but it comes to a head in maybe around Christmas time, and then gradually tails off at this time of year. The bulb fields are fantastic places to go and have a look, not just for the bulbs, but all this, what are called arable weeds. Again, plants which are a little bit tricky to find now on the mainland. Another of those specialities that you can really only find on Scilly, and not all over the place, but on one spot on one island, this little adder's tongue fern. This is the smallest of our ferns. I think the next spot you'd have to go down to would be perhaps on to the Channel Islands before you'd see this, or in Portugal. Tiny little plant, and it's a winter plant. On autumn tricks, we sometimes find this one just appearing. Another Mediterranean plant, this little orange bird's foot. In the Mediterranean, you probably wouldn't look at it because there are so many other exciting things to see. But it's a stronghold on several of the islands now. And the small mallow, this tiny little pansy, is a real challenge. Very, very small plant in one spot on one island. So you need to know where to look to find this. And it's a real hands and knees job to find it. And if you think it might make a nice display in the flower tubs in your front garden, think again, because this is someone's fingernail. Just to give you an idea of the size of this little thing. We're always quite pleased when we manage to find this one in the spring. But we could go on with a whole list of really special native plants that make Scilly a very special place for the botanist. And April, May particularly, is a really good time. There's something to see all through the year because there's very, very rarely a frost or snow. So things flower all the time. And the main factor that limits how or where things can grow would be salt spray and wind. The lanes are just filled with this three-cornered leek, a very abundant plant, but there are others, more showy things like the wild leek. I'm sorry about this, what's happened there? Well, the main town is Hugh Town, and we stay, there are various places, in fact, that are used on the trips, but normally a comfortable guest house in Hugh Town. And you can't ever be more than a few steps from the sea, just a very short distance. And on one side, we have the lovely Porth Cressa beach, and on the other side, the channel leading up to Tresco and to Briar. This is an ancient burial chamber on the top of Buzzer Hill, looking down over Hugh Town. Beautiful, peaceful day. And there are lots of exotic things to see there as well, like this curious plant, which always intrigues people when we go there in the autumn. This is a plant called Fascicularia, very prickly customer, actually a bromeliad relative from Mexico. There are hedgehogs there as well, introduced, of course. The only native mammals, there was marine mammals there, the seals, the cetaceans, maybe the long-eared bats. But these were introduced not that long ago. And the best place to see hedgehogs is down on a beach at night. If you're going back from a bar or restaurant at night, you shine your torch along the strand line, and there'll be big plump hedgehogs feeding on sandhoppers. This is probably not the day to be out on a boat, but if you're there for long enough, you possibly will experience a storm, and then you get an idea of how vulnerable the islands can be and how tough the birds, the wildlife have to be to survive that. On one occasion, on a particularly stormy day, it was so bad that a grey phalarope was thrown in from the sea, and as the waves receded, it was left there on a road. A really stunned, shattered bird. We picked it up and took it to a place of safety, and it recovered. It preened and looked a bit dazed for a while, and hopefully eventually got back out to sea. Unfortunately, it's not always like that, but you can see why the islands would be a good place for seabirds to shelter. Now, on trips, we do encourage people to get out on a pelagic trip, so that's out beyond the islands, if at all possible. And the collection of gulls following a boat, but if you look closely, down below the gulls, there are mostly lesser blackbacks here, much smaller birds, and here these are storm petrels. There's a breeding colony of storm petrels on the islands, and being so far out to sea anyway, this is a good place for watching the seabirds and cetaceans. Some common dolphins here, which regularly follow the Selonian into the harbour and soon join you if you're out on a pelagic trip. But all sorts of things, not just resident birds like stormies that breed there, but real ocean wanderers turn up quite regularly in the summer. If you're out on a pelagic, you'll see great shearwaters, sometimes many hundreds of them, large numbers of them. And the resident storm petrels very often will follow a boat. If the skippers take you out on what we call a pelagic trip, they'll throw chum over the side, which is, well, rotten fish, basically, sometimes soaked in popcorn so that it floats. And these birds have a really good sense of smell, and they'll come and investigate. So you can get excellent views of these seabirds. And of course, the real prize of the bird watchers would be the Wilson's petrel, which has come from way down in the South Atlantic, another great ocean wanderer. This is probably one of the best places to see it. So a lot of these things you could see from the land, from sea watching, but getting out on a small boat just beyond the islands can be really exciting. But in between the islands, there are small colonies of seabirds. There are not huge cliffs, so that limits the numbers a bit. But there are some very good colonies of guillemots, puffins there, bridal guillemot appears sometimes, and razorbills. Then there are dwindling numbers, sadly, of kittiwakes, but Manx shearwaters, stormies I mentioned, and large numbers of shags. So it's in the early summer trips, really good for seeing seabirds. Then in between the islands, or sorry, on the islands, and particularly on St. Mary's, there are a number of wetlands, and hides have been provided. All sorts of things can turn up. You never really know. And a lot depends on the weather, of course, and the time of year. So you wouldn't always look out and see a spotted crake, but in the autumn, there's certain places where you can be fairly certain if that you're going to find one if you stay long enough. And ospreys move through, and they're rather attracted to these shallow pools on the island. The fish are grey mullet, which really are marine fish. And sometimes on a very high tide, small fish get washed in from the sea into these pools, and then they stay there and they can live in this brackish water and grow, not get back to the sea. And those provide perfect conditions for an osprey to come and fish. And this one was so close that we were almost able to read the ring number on it. But probably one of the best places you'll ever go to see snipe is here on the islands. And using these hides in the autumn, you get really close views, snipe and jack snipe as well. Water rails, it can be abundant there. And just go to another view. Sometimes on the freshwater pools, you might get to see rough white in the autumn. And then if you're really lucky, lesser yellowlegs. These now seem to turn up in the spring and in the autumn. I've seen several of these spring ones on the May trips, and then again in September, even on into October, there could be one somewhere. Now, some people are a bit put off. They thought that if they go there, there'll be vast numbers of bird watchers. You won't be able to move. And occasionally you might get a sight like this, a little crowd of people watching something. It could be that someone spotted a dotterel and we're all keeping our distance, keeping back, not flashing the bird because these are tired migrants and they need to rest and feed. Could be golden plover as well. But one thing you learn is that you need to look carefully at every bird. There are normally enough people around to let you know if there's something worth looking at, but just check, because amongst the golden plover might be an American golden plover. In fact, these usually prefer to be on a beach or somewhere where there's some water rather than up on the sort of heathland areas with a golden plover, but quite regularly these turn up. Buff-breasted sandpipers, again, sometimes as many as 3 or 4 together might turn up on one of the islands. In fact, the last autumn when I was there, we had, I think on one day, 4 different transatlantic waders, bared sandpiper, as well as the American golden plover, and buff-breasted lesser yellowlegs as well. So lots of little lanes to wander around at, and there aren't crowds of people. It might seem when you're waiting for a little boat in the morning to go to an island that there are hundreds of people there, but once you arrive on another island or go off for your walk, it seems like you can have the place to yourself. You've got the chance to find your own birds. But again, check everything really carefully. You might be lucky enough to find a little bunting or a Lapland bunting, also quite regular. The glorious views, of course, in every direction. We're on Tresco here, looking sort of vaguely back towards the mainland, St. Martin's in the background and the Eastern Isles on a glorious day, and an ortolan bunting decided to turn up here in this open area. Another curious thing about it is that on the same week, very often on a trip, you could have a bird like this cream-coloured courser, which ought to be in a desert somewhere, much warmer, drier climes, here feeding on the golf course on St. Mary's. And then a day or two later, on a foul day, a huge bird flew in from the sea and landed on a little bit of moorland. And there was a snowy owl, so an Arctic bird. And places like this, you might wander along a beach, see a little pipit, and you have to check very, very carefully, and a Blythe's pipit might turn up. So every bird needs to be checked. Lovely peaceful scene looking back towards Tresco from the top end of St. Mary's. And again, a really quiet scene, some conifers which are planted as shelter belts. And these are always worth checking for things like firecrest, which again is a good autumn bird, and goldcrest, quite good numbers of those. There are certain spots where you just know you're going to see those, like these shelter belts. But maybe if you're lucky, a Pallas's warbler could turn up. They're all tiny little birds, often up in the tree canopy somewhere. So very careful observation needed. And the default small warbler in the autumn, and more or less anywhere where there's a bit of cover, would be yellow-browed warbler. Very good place to see those. So we always listen out for the first ones of those in September, and they can be there in some numbers for quite some time. Now, don't be put off by this. This is a rare occasion when there's a birders might call a mega twitch turning up, and lots of people homing on a particular spot. Actually, they're not looking at much there. They're waiting around for something to happen. But here, an oven bird from America turned up, to the delight of all the bird watchers. So you really don't know where the birds are coming from, what might turn up. You can sort of predict it. And although you want maybe plain sailing, nice weather for the boat crossing to get there, really awful weather often stirs things up. Well, this is more the normal sort of scene. You wander along, there might be a couple of people peering over a wall or into a bush, ask if they found something interesting. In this case, a grey-cheeked thrush from America. I should point out I've been going to the islands for over 40 years now, so this is not what you would see in 1 week on one trip. You have to put in the hours, of course, but you just really don't know what's going to turn up. That's the exciting thing about it. And any spot, any corner could produce something, like an olive-backed pipit on an ordinary little bit of grassland. And all around, of course, are lovely scenes, beautiful gardens, lovely vistas of the other islands, and birds hopping around. A red-breasted flycatcher in its autumn plumage, regular October bird, and red-flanked bluetail, another bird, not every year, but again, on the autumn trips, with any luck, you might find these, on one occasion, sometimes more, some of the islands. Black-pearl warbler, an American bird, fairly regular visitor in small numbers. The hedgerows, looking a bit sparse in the background, are hedgerows of elm. This is just about the only place now where you can wander around under lofty elm trees. I'm not sure what the residents of St. Mary's Hall Hotel thought one morning when they drew back the curtains to their bedroom windows and looked out, a battery of cameras, well, there's a dozen or so people there, and right in Hewtown in St. Mary's, little bird hopping about in a sycamore tree turned out to be a Sub-Alpine Warbler, Western Sub-Alpine Warbler. And again, I've had these on both spring trips and autumn trips. And by the autumn, quite a number of birders there. And so if anything does get found, word gets around. But there's every chance, wandering around, you'll find something for yourself. This palm tree, when I first visited the islands over 40 years ago, was a little stump of a thing, much lower than the cottage. Each year, it's grown a little bit more. And the garden, sometimes quite a good place to look for things like the rose-coloured starling, rather scruffy-looking juvenile bird there. Again, right in the middle of Hewtown, in the main town. So we do a lot of walking. We do boat trips to the other islands. We sometimes sit and watch, looking out to sea. Sometimes we take picnics. Sometimes we go into a little cafe. It's all very leisurely, no real plan. Really, a lot depends on what the weather is doing, what the birds are doing, what news gets out, and really how people feel about the trip. But once we're there, no worries of getting minibuses or any other transport until we have to come home again. The trips leave generally in the morning on the Solonian. So the first day we have a sea crossing and the rest of the day on the islands, and coming back, the Solonian leaves late in the afternoon. So we have another almost whole day on the islands and another sea crossing. So if you're into birds and exploring and into wildflowers, I can really recommend the Isles of Scilly. And although maybe you might put off a little bit by the thought of a boat crossing, there are easier ways to get there. A wheatear, but just check carefully. Sometimes what you think is a wheatear, closer examination turns out to be a young black-eared wheatear. So I'll leave you with a typical Naturetrek scene, a beautiful day, late September. We're on St Agnes, or at least on the sandbar connecting St Agnes with the Gew. Beautiful black redstart on one of the beaches there, classic autumn bird. And, oh dear, sorry about this. And this very curious caterpillar, the grass egger caterpillar that people often remark about in the autumn. There are lots of curiosities there. As you might gather, I could go on all night talking about these islands. So I hope if you haven't been, I've given you some food for thought about a future trip. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I hugely enjoyed that. I've been to Scilly's for one day back when you could really easily fly over from, you got the helicopter from Penzance. I don't know if you can do that now. I
think you can now, yes.
You do, it's come back again, hasn't it? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So I had one day and I wasn't lucky enough to see a snowy owl, but maybe another time. Okay, so hopefully Jessica's back and hopefully Mike will rejoin us in a moment. So I hope you all enjoyed this evening, hearing about some wonderful destinations. If you've got any questions, now is your opportunity. So please do pop any questions you might have for
Kerrie?
Any of us.
Kerrie, I'm here. Kerrie, I'm here.
I turned you off in time. Sorry, Mike.
I've been here all along.
Ask to start video. It should let you start now. There you are. Welcome back. So yeah, any questions you might have for us, whether it's about one of the tours you've just seen, heard about, or just travel, anything like that, please let us know. Now, one question that came in, I think whilst I was talking, from Jane Sampson, she asked, is the altitude in the Alps likely to cause any health issues? I certainly have never experienced that when I've been there, or any of the people on any of the trips I've been with, nor have I heard it from anyone else on any of our tours. You're going high up, but you're not going that high up, and you're not sleeping at altitude, which is often where it starts getting a bit trickier. So the only thing really to do, I would say, is double check your travel insurance, because there are some policies that ask you to let them know if you're, I think either if you're going up to over 2,000 meters, or if you're hiking and trekking, and there's different wording being over 2,000 meters, and they like to know about it. It doesn't necessarily affect anything or your premium or anything like that, but they like to be told. But I've never known anyone get altitude sickness in the European Alps. I've much more likely to get sunburn or dehydration, so please pack your sun cream. Remember, the sun is very bright and hot and strong at that altitude. And that's about it, really. Any other questions from anyone? It's all quite quiet this evening. Mike, you were grilled earlier on what the difference between a park naturel and a reserve naturel. Have you done your research yet? Have you found out?
I tried. Actually, I tried Googling it, but I couldn't actually get very far with it. They will be different levels of protection, different levels of designation in the Spanish system, but I can't give you a definitive answer at this stage. But it will be to do with the way that the site is managed and the level of protection that it has on it.
Yeah, fair enough.
A bit vague, I know, but it's
fine. It was quite a tricky question, that one, but thanks, Peter, for asking it. He's us on our toes at all times. Neville has asked, he missed a lot of the presentation. Never mind, Neville, this happens to the best of us. Yes, you will, for all of our evenings like this, we pop a link on our website. So if you look back there in a day or two, you'll be able to click on this particular evening and watch it back, as you can for any of the evenings. Not many questions coming in. The three of you, if you could travel to one other place in the Alps or in Europe to go botanising or birding, where would you go? Andrew first, over to you.
One other place? Well, I've only once...
where you've spoken about. Where would you go?
I've only once been to Switzerland, so
Great choice.
So I need to go there.
Yeah, definitely.
Very mouth-watering and tempting.
Yeah, it is fabulous. Yeah. Jessica, choose another location, please.
That's really difficult. I mean, of the places I go, Abruzzo is very special and the Dolomites are very special in Italy, but there are other places in Europe I'd love to explore as well.
I would also jump on board with the Dolomites. I have never been, and I always thought it would probably combine some fantastic wildlife and botany, but also some excellent food. And I do like to go to places that have really good food as well, and Italy normally comes up trumps on that.
Absolutely, and really good coffee as well.
Oh yeah, great. Mike, what about you?
It's a similar answer, to be honest. I haven't actually been to the Alps that much, so there's quite a lot of it I've not been to, and I'm happy to go anywhere and have a rummage. So yeah, Dolomites sounds great. That southeast corner of Switzerland as well is somewhere I've always wanted to go. It's just so many places, and so it's all different. You know, different rocks mean different soils, which means different plants, different valley aspects, whether it's north facing or south facing. So you've only got to go around the corner and see different things. So yeah, fabulous. The Alps, the Pyrenees, anywhere like that as well. You know, let's not forget the good old Pyrenees. It's wonderful.
Mustn't forget them now.
Yeah.
Right, those two Swiss tours, the Wengen and Pontresina, you can do this back to back. Very nice option indeed, and it is amazing the contrast. And you go from one to the other. It's two really different parts of the same country. But, we have got a couple of questions. What, Andrew, is the best time to go to Scilly's for absolute max wildlife? So you need a good storm or something to...
Max wildlife, yes. Well, if you go in May or June, you have all the seabirds. So the puffins, the guillemots, the razorbills, shearwaters would be there. The resident birds would also be in sort of full swing breeding. The flowers would be fantastic. There'd be quite a lot of butterflies. So that, and you have long days as well and good weather. And you'd avoid the school holidays, dare I say. But if it's the bird migration, I think May is a very good time for the things like bee eaters, hoopoes, the woodchat shrikes. And September, probably late September, beginning of October, would be just about the peak of bird migration. So, but if it's just a general, if you've not been before, you wanted to get a real flavour of Scilly, I think so perhaps June, the seabird time, would be a good time to go.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Quick COVID question. Do any of the featured countries require quarantine if affected? If you're having to quarantine on arrival in the country, then we simply won't be running the tour because you can't do an Naturetrek holiday in quarantine. It just doesn't work. So if that was the case, then we would be getting in touch with you to let you know what your options are, which would be to transfer to the tour or have a full refund. But as it stands, pretty much Europe is open. Generally, at the moment, you need to do a test before you go, and we can advise on how and when to do that. It's pretty straightforward. At the moment, there's a test when you get back. The UK government needs a lateral flow test, day 2 test, but that looks like it's going to be scrapped pretty imminently. All the signs are before Feb half term, if not earlier. So it's all getting much better and easier. There's just a few scattered countries around the world which sort of have, some countries have closed their borders and are still that way. But elsewhere, there's a few hoops to jump through, but we can help with that. We're ready to get traveling again. I'm going to let Gil have one more question here because you could, I know you like to ask your questions. What about the dolphins in island of Scilly or seals? I think it's wondering what you might see.
Grey seals are resident, so no problem in seeing those. They're on all of the islands, and in September, October time, they'll start having their pups, and so you've got a very good chance of seeing them. Dolphins, mainly a summer thing. Common dolphins, maybe the most regular. Harbour porpoise is there quite regularly. Any of the little boat trips between the islands, you might get harbour porpoise. And then increasingly, they're getting whale sightings. So minke whale now is quite regular. Seen from the shore, certain spots on St. Martin's, you regularly see minke whale. Last year, they're all sighting photographs of humpback whale as well. And then as you leave Penzance on the boat, there's a chance then of bottlenose dolphin and rissos. So all the way, that's why I always recommend the boat. So it adds to me a bit more to the holiday, 3 hours on the boat and all those seabirds and dolphins and a real sense of traveling and where the islands are as well. But the only seals are the greys, which are resident on all of the islands. There are lots to see.
Fabulous. Thank you, Andrew. And then another question here, can any Alps holidays be reached by train? Yes, so at the moment, we don't sort of start and finish in the UK with your tour leader and as a group. So what we would do is book you on a land-only basis. And then lots of people just like to sort of get themselves to the start, sometimes taking a little bit of time to do it. So there's some really nice routes and you can stop overnight along the way. We can help with that. We always encourage people to do this sort of thing. It's a really nice way to travel, avoid the flying altogether, and set off from the UK. So yes, that's the sort of the very short, simple answer. Definitely the Swiss holidays that I spoke about. I know quite a few people over the last few years have met us either in Zurich or Geneva, having set off a day or two earlier and got the train all the way there and then stayed on the train the whole time. It's fabulous. So yeah, just let us know what you fancy doing and we can help with that. I think we might be about there. So thank you very much, Andrew, Jessica, Mike, for your fabulous presentations. We will hopefully see you all again some other time, talk about some other destinations. But otherwise, thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. Next up, if you fancy visiting the Far East or hearing about it, then join us next Tuesday. We will be going to Borneo, Thailand, Cambodia and Japan. So that's Tuesday 25th. You can sign up on the website if you haven't already. Otherwise, I hope you all have a fabulous evening. Enjoy the rest of what's left, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks very much. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Goodbye.
Bye.